Hey there, this is Mike from the Digital Transformation Project team. In this video, I want to walk you through A to Z on an operation and all the different processes that we've built into the EMS. And so it's going to be hopefully not too long of a video. I'm going to try to stay high level, but there is a lot of information, so feel free to watch this a few times until it makes a little bit of sense. So an operation for Team Rubicon is going to be known as a project inside of Microsoft Dynamics or inside of the EMS. So if I might say project interchangeably with the word operation. To start with, every operation is going to have a hazard. And so you'd start by going to hazards and clicking new and then putting in the required fields. And the hazard is basically the high level reason that we are going to an area or that we are looking at going to an area. So in this case, we're going to use Operation Storming Stallion as an example. And the hazard was the Woolsey fire in California that hit. So they'd put in the hazard, they'd go to projects, they'd click on new, and it would create a new project from that hazard information. So I'm going to not do that this time just because we already have one going here that I'll show you. And once we get into the project, it's split up between three different main categories. From the summary through from the ISR through the resource requirements, this would all be considered the mission planning area. From registrants through personnel and a little bit of resource requirements, this is the mobilization area, along with something called a schedule board and an audience, which we'll talk about. And then over here on the right, from strike teams through spontaneous volunteers, as well as there's a few things in here like fragos, flights, audiences. These are all considered part of the day-to-day operational management. So in general, the summary tab kind of spans all three of those. And you would start out with really not too much information in the summary tab as you're building this, but then over time you would start adding more things in, which we'll talk about. But in general, the summary has the situation overview that you did during the hazard. It's got the hazard linked. It's got everything you see here, the type of disaster, etc. Once you have the hazard and the project built, you probably start out with the ISR. This is the initial situation report as part of the mission planning process. So it has all the ISR type questions on here that you would expect to have. So people can decide, someone that's putting in an ISR can either put it in directly if they have the correct license, or they can still use the templates and collaborate inside of SharePoint to put it together. But ultimately, someone will need to come here and actually do the data entry. So we have the person that prepared it, which might be different than the person that submitted it, but we do want to track who's actually creating these things. We've got the overview, we've got the response efforts, all these different ISR related fields. We've got a big SVI block. We've got vulnerability descriptions, etc. This is a new thing here where we are trying to capture as many of the people that we're working with in the community as we can, the non-volunteer contacts. So it's accurate to say that all of Team Rubicon's volunteers have a contact record in the system, but not every contact record is a volunteer. We could have VOAD members, we could have emergency management, public works, really anybody that we're working with along the way. We now have a mechanism to create an account and create a contact for those people so that we can track them long term and keep them apprised of how this operation went, talk to them later, etc. We also have a next step block. And it of course has the next steps after the ISR. We have an approval block, and so basically once everything's filled out, they would submit it for approval. It would automatically go out to the approver. They'd have a chance to come take a look, and then they can approve it from here. Once it's approved, you'll notice that most of these fields have a lock icon on them. It's because we want to lock the fields down after approval so that they're not accidentally changed later on. At any time when you're in the mission planning process, you can also use this Word template dropdown. Pick the particular document type that you want, and it's going to take the fields and dynamically create a document, in this case an ISR, that we can look at in order to kind of see where things are at this particular moment. And as changes are made, you would basically run a new ISR until it looks right. And then ultimately there is a drop down up here to say we want to upload the ISR, and then we'll do that process again and put it in SharePoint. And from there, you would still be able to edit it to be able to add maps and other graphics and things of that nature, fix bullet points, etc. So in this case, the ISR said we want to go to Recon, so we have a Recon tab. The main difference here is that we now also have a recon event. So recon, advon, and the op board will all have their own events, and that is to be able to track who's actually on the recon, if there's any logistics or finance type things. So if we go into one of these, you can see we're still using the same type of event form that we're used to for normal events, but now specific to the recon, we could add additional logistical information, additional finance information, and these will be approved at the same time as the actual tab on the project. So we don't need a separate approval for the lower level event. So lots of recon related things on here. This one happens to already be approved, and so that's why it's all locked down. At that point, they would move on to the Warno, and that's important to know that you can move through all these different mission planning pieces without having the previous stage approved yet, but you can't really approve the stage. You can't approve a future stage if the predecessor stage is not yet approved. So we have all the Warno fields, and here we're starting to get into how many people we think it's going to take in order to successfully pull off an operation. And once the Warno is approved, that will automatically trigger a couple different things. One is National Mobilization will create something called an audience, and the audience is intended to help create the actual availability email that will go out. So similar to the existing process, here we have the ability to say, we know the zip code of the project from the summary, right? And so from this zip code, the audience builder will automatically do a 450-mile radius and tell us all of the people that are within that radius. And so it'll start from there. And then if that's the list of people that we want to send the availability notice to, then we're good. We can just hit create marketing list. But if we want to, we now finally have the ability to say we want to sort by distance, or we want to limit by distance, or we want to limit by drive time. So for example, if I say we can only have a maximum of a 2-hour drive for whatever reason, then we'll go from 98, in this case, down to 12. So that might be a little bit too limiting, but you get the idea. Like this allows us to make changes on the fly to get to the right level of audience to be able to send that out and just say, hey, we're going to do this thing. Are you available? Now that email is a little bit beyond the scope of this particular video. It's something that National Mob will be handling for us for a while. And so I don't want to dip into that, but the recipient of that email will be getting a notification saying, click here to go get more information and sign up. So since I'm a part of that list, I will receive the landing page hyperlink. And when I come to the landing page, I'll be able to check out the situation, the capabilities we're going for, the mission as it's written, and whatever goals we have as part of the operation, which all of this is derived from the mission planning pieces. And then I have some options here to say that I agree to fly on a wave, or I'm going to be driving, etc. Different people that are different distances away will get different options here. And when I click on register, it's going to then show me my contact information just so I can make any last minute updates. There's a few things it needs to ask me, especially if I'm going to be on a flight wave. We have to ask people very specific information in order to book someone's ticket for them, because if they get to the TSA and this information is not accurate, they will be declined at the airport. So we don't want to accidentally waste donor money on a ticket that someone can't use by not having this information. So it's very important that people put it in there accurately. Dietary restrictions, if I say whatever I say here, whenever I hit next, it's actually going to save that behind the scenes so that the next operation that I'm on, I shouldn't have to re-enter that. So that's pretty handy. The next phase here, it's asking me to double check the participation agreement, or what we used to call the SMART waiver. So I'm going to have to read this and make sure that I understand and hit accept. And then the next piece is that it'll show me a calendar of all the different waves that I can choose from. And again, this stems from the resource requirement list. This is the wish list items, and anything that has a related event is going to show up for me as one of these different options that I can select. So if I click it once and turn it green, that is me telling the mission planning team that I'm available for that day for this particular role or flight or wave or whatever it may be. If it's a flight wave, it's likely to be a bigger block like this. And for this particular event, just because we've been kind of murdering it behind the scenes as part of testing, it happens to have some extra requirements, but this would not normally show up this way. So disregard what you're seeing here. The overall gist, though, is that I can select an entire wave, or if I'm a driver, I can say, well, I can make Monday and Wednesday and Thursday, but I can't do Tuesday or Friday. And that way it allows people to give a heads up to the people that are doing the mobilization of what your actual availability will be. So it's just helpful for the planning phase. So then I'll hit next, and behind the scenes it's doing a bunch of stuff with my contact record, my resource record. It's basically telling the system that I'm available and opening up like a hidden calendar behind the scenes. So this can take a little bit of time behind the scenes. Ultimately what it's doing though is it will record the fact that I'm now a registrant of the event. So here's my little test record here. It's also going to automatically vet me behind the scenes. If I'm deployable, I'll be turned to vetted, and if not, I'll be turned over to missing prereq. So that part is now automatic. We don't have to go check, for people's ICS certs and that kind of thing anymore. So from the registrant area, and again, we're still in between the Warno and OpWard here. The next piece would go to the mobilization team to start looking at, can we actually start booking people or earmarking people for the different roles that we have, the different resource requirements. So this is something called the schedule board, and the schedule board will allow you to filter on the left-hand side for the thing that you're looking for. So for example, in Storming Stallion, we might pick from several of the TR or qualifications, like we might be looking for Sawyers, we might be looking for heavy equipment, etc. We might be looking for a specific role. Like in this case, we only have general responder, but in the future, we'll have lots of different roles for people. And then you hit search. It will show you who is still available, and then you can select somebody and then hit this book button. And what this should do is basically, in this case, we have a 30-hour requirement, and that's okay. That's expected at the moment in dev. That's fine. But normally this would say, all right, we've got 24 hours of our 30 now handled by booking this one person, like earmarking them. And then what happens is for the people that are booked, they will move over to the personnel tab. So these are the people that are already earmarked. And again, we're not to a level that we're dispatching anybody yet, because we're still in between the Warno and the OpWard. We might be still working on the OpWard. But we have people that are accepted for the initial bookings. And then whenever the OpWard gets approved, that's when we can go in and actually select the people and say dispatch. And then they will be added to a list of people that will then get dispatch instructions and the rally information, the on-site POC. As this changes, it will also go and update the dispatch instructions that go out. So over the course of a long operation, you might have 3 or 4 different resource unit leaders or planning section chiefs or whoever the case may be. And so as this changes, it will also go update the personnel as well, like who the actual point of contact is. So we're building in a lot of little things like that to try to help out. You also notice that as I select people, we have the ability to group them up and stand them down. If we go back to registrants, we've got a couple different views. So like here's all the people that are missing prereqs. So we could select them all and tell them to stand down or tell them to stand by. They would automatically get an email telling them that they're not deployable yet, so they would need to go and work on the things that would make them deployable. And we can also look at the people that have already been vetted that haven't quite yet been accepted or booked on the schedule board yet. And so this just helps to understand kind of like who's left in the hopper. So because this is a test project, there's really not too many names here, but a normal operation we see, potentially hundreds of people in these different things. So we're building views to be able to help categorize and sort correctly. We can also take a look at, for the people that are on the ground, like who's actually arriving today, who's leaving today, and that'll help with, carpooling to the airport and that kind of thing. So once the OpWard's approved, we would select our people, we would hit dispatch. They would move from accepted over to dispatched. Don't worry about soft book versus hard book. We're going to actually get rid of that terminology. So at that point, if the OpWard's approved, we've dispatched people. Now we're actually in the first operational period. The rest of the things that we'll talk about are part of the day-to-day management. And so the first thing we'll say is the strike teams will be automatically created for you based on the overall incident type. So the higher the incident type, like if it's a type 1, it's going to go create 26 strike teams because we think you might need that many. If it's a type 5, it's probably only going to make 3 or 4. So we've automated that part of it. And you can see I've got one for the C and G as well, which will come in handy in the next step, which is something that we've so far termed strike team alignment. And this is simply our look at the first stage of being able to automate things like the 204s, where we're not quite there yet, but we did want to ensure that everybody has the ability to understand where everyone is at. Anybody that's boots on the ground at the op should be in and should have a booking record for today, one for tomorrow, and one for every day that they're going to be on scene based on what they elected to put in their calendar here. So from this view, you have the ability to take a look at today's bookings to see where everyone is today, but also as part of the IAP, you'd be planning out tomorrow's staffing and 204s. And so from this menu, you can say that this person, for example, we're going to put, they were on Foxtrot today, and they had a role of maybe general responder or strike team leader or whatever you want to put for the role. And then same for tomorrow, we can say tomorrow she's going to be on this particular strike team, and she's going to be the general responder for now. The other thing that you can do is you can group up by the different columns that you see here. So if we want to group by strike team, for example, we pick strike team, and that way the people that don't yet have a role would float to the top. People that are already on a strike team would get filled out down below. So we can see we still need some more people for alpha. So we'll put this person in alpha. Oops, clicked the wrong one. And these would actually be in the C and G, so I hit the wrong button down here, which is fine. We can change it. We'll put Josh in alpha. So you can see we're just building out the strike teams as we go, and we can set the role that they were. So we need probably a strike team leader. And as you're deciding what role for people to be in, you can scroll to the right and understand a few different things here. So this would be if they have any of the specific qualifications that we're looking for, they would show up here. And you should be able to sort and filter by these as well. You can also see the number of deployments that they've been on, as well as the last time they deployed. So that way we can take a look at, is this a seasoned veteran deployer? Is this someone who's brand new? So that you can help distribute the expertise across multiple strike teams, as well as the different skills across multiple strike teams. And obviously if you have like a Sawyer strike team, you'd want to make sure that it's full of Sawyers as an example. So it's important to note that just because you book somebody for a specific requirement or you earmark them for it, it does not mean that you're forced to use that person on that particular strike team. So the command and general staff on the ground at the op can still decide to put people in whatever strike team they need to in order to get the mission done for that day. For spontaneous volunteers, we have a simple input form. So as people approach the fob, or if they, however you decide to intake them, it's a simple form. Or say they're starting today and they are going to be here through Friday, if that's what they told you. So now we can save and close that, and behind the scenes it will make some records for them so that they can have an individual booking. So that's it for the run through. That was basically A to Z. There's going to be a lot more detail in the specific videos for each section. And again, like I mentioned, make sure you check the wiki to understand the latest, greatest. So thank you for your time if you made it this far. Check out the next videos for more information.